Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you're connected from. My name is Magali Amiel, and I will be your moderator today. I'm member of the board of the CILTNA and a goods movement strategist. So welcome to this webinar, hosted by the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in North America. First, I hope that you, your families, and colleagues are healthy in this challenging time. Let me start with a quick introduction on CILT for our new attendees. So we are a professional body in the supply chain, logistics, and transport industry with 34,000 members in over 30 countries. CILT's mission is to develop the art and science of logistics and transport through research, education, networking, and the sharing of ideas. Of course, in 2020, you do a lot of webinars, so we have some rules to share with you. First, everyone is mute with your video off. Please do not unmute or turn on your video. Second, we encourage any question you would like to put to the speakers and have planned time at the end of the presentation for a Q&A period. If you have a question, please use the Zoom chat. Third, this event is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the CILTNA's YouTube channel. Finally, after the webinar, you will receive a feedback survey. Please take a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes maximum, to complete it. Your comments and inputs help us to provide better services. Today, this webinar is sponsored by HerbalLink Container Services. Thank you for your sponsorship. Thank you for your trust. It's really important for us on that time having sponsors. So thank you, HerbalLinks. So now it's time for the show. Let me introduce our speakers and share with you his incredible background. We have the privilege to present Erwin Verstraelen. In November 2017, Erwin became Chief Digital and Innovation Officer of the Port of Antwerp, a new position in the Executive Committee. It was a clear indication of the strategic focus the port wants to give to digitalization. Based on previous role in other companies, he has a strong background in strategic IT thinking and in-depth transformation of an organization driven by information technology. His current team at the Port of Antwerp drives the injection of new and existing IT capabilities to enable the realization of strategic goals. Erwin was elected CIO of the Year in 2018 and European Digital Leader in 2020. So congratulations for this recognition of your passion and your innovation. And Erwin, the scene is yours.
Thank you very much, Magali, and also a warm welcome to everyone here attending the conference. I've been kindly asked by my Canadian friends, and for sure also the people in Montreal, our colleagues from the port, to give you an overview of what we are doing in creating what I call the port of the future, and the driver of digital transformation in it. So Ports of the Future is the title of my keynote, and the baseline is innovation with a purpose, because we are building a port for the future that has to enable a lot of transformation capabilities, and I will address those as I move through my presentation. Since we're going to talk about innovation and digital, it's important to understand the context we're starting from, because both topics, digital and innovation, are not the goal in itself, but are a means to an end. And the starting point is the Port of Antwerp as it is existing today. And I just briefly give you on one slide some highlights. The fact that we are a 235 million ton cargo harbor, that we are employing 144,000 jobs, direct, indirect, that we provide 20 billion euros of added value on a yearly basis, leading in a lot of traditional cargo categories. Also, you see over there 15 million containers. But also we are the second largest petrochemical cluster on the planet. And that, of course, on its own creates a very interesting dynamic where you have cargo coming in and out, especially also for that cargo group. Now, what those figures don't show is what an incredible journey it has been over the last 3 decades. If you look back at where we were, let's say in the mid of the 90s, when the port started to, when the globalization started to pick up, and where we saw the opportunity to go along with it to become a world port, that's been impressive. But it doesn't make us blind for the fact that we are living in very challenging time. In many ways, what I describe is we are living in a perfect storm. And by that I mean a convergence of forces that are impacting us at the same time. And I'm just highlighting the most important of them. First of all, a lot of innovative tech, and then you talk about digitization, but it goes way beyond that because you talk about drones, automated ships, automated vehicles, all these kind of technologies that are not traditionally in the realm of IT are becoming part of the mix, becoming part of the blend. Also geopolitics. When I say United States, Russia, and United Kingdom, I've mentioned 3 out of the 5 most important trading partners for the Port of Antwerp. And you know that in all these conditions like trade sanctions, trade barriers, and the Brexit, which we are normally should be heading into a final conclusion. Is it going to be a hard Brexit, yes or no? All these things have an immediate impact on our port. Room for sustainable growth. Are we still allowed to grow? The growth argument in our Western society is becoming a little bit cumbersome. It almost sounds like it is a dirty word. And then, of course, climate change and linked to that energy transition. As I just said, we are the 2nd largest petrochemical cluster in Antwerp. That also means a lot of CO2 emissions. So if we're going to be leading in achieving the EU Green Deal, so 0 CO2 emissions by 2050, that means a lot of transformation and a lot of innovation that needs to take place. So in summary, you could say, and that is something we fully understand, that we live in a world of known unknowns that are going to be associated by a lot of unknown unknowns. And this is a slide that I've been using in my keynote for more than 1.5 years. So when you look at this statement from the perspective of the world we're living in and what we have experienced over the last 6-7 months, it's very obvious that that is true. The only question on the table that you can debate is whether the pandemic is a known unknown or an unknown unknown. I have my personal opinion on that, but I leave it to you to make up your mind as well. So what that means is that for us, it became obvious at the end of 2017 that everything that brought us to success in the past is for sure not a guarantee for the future. The recipe is not any longer a guarantee for success. So it forced us to stand in front of the mirror and ask ourselves the very fundamental question: who do we want to be? Where do we make the difference? These are the strategic questions every organization has to ask him or herself on a regular basis. But given the perfect storm I just explained, it was becoming very important to have a clear view. So after a long and in-depth mission, vision, and strategy cycle, we came up with a new mission statement. We want to be a lever or a home port vital for a sustainable future. The Dutch version says we want to be a catalyst towards a sustainable future. And what that means is that we see ourselves, given the fact that we are an economic engine for Belgium, that we are a powerhouse, given all these companies and the added value and so on, that we want to be a partner, that we want to be a pioneer, that we want to be a lever towards a sustainable future. And sustainable can mean a lot of things: on mobility, on climate change, on circular economy, etc., etc. So all of that was transferred or translated into a strategic plan moving forward with 5 strategic objectives. And under these 5 objectives, we have 15 programs and 70 projects. For example, in mobility in terms of cargo, how is the modal split going to evolve between trucks, barges, and train, where we want to reduce the ecological footprint, where we want to reduce the CO2, where we want to make better usage of available capacity. So the multimodal, the synchromodal split between all these things. We see it as our responsibility to make sure that that evolves in the right way. In terms of transition, circular economy, energy transition, but also the digital transformation of the supply chain in and around the port are on the agenda. So here you see a couple of examples of how we are translating that mission statement into an actual strategy plan. And then, of course, you end up with, where does digitization fit in? Well, for me, it's very obvious that digital is a key enabler, is a catalyst once more in achieving strategic goals. Or put it the other way around, it is not the goal in itself. So it's very important that you can explain and make clear what are your goals, where is digitization and digital innovation for that matter going to make an impact. And the easiest way that we can make that clear to the large ecosystem of stakeholders is by linking it to the 4 roles that we fulfill as a port authority, which is the landlord, the regulator, the operator role, and then finally the community builder. Starting with the latter, the community builder role is all about facilitating digital transformation for the entire ecosystem of the 1,000 companies and other stakeholders like customs, food and drug administration, and so on. And for that, we have created 3 fundamental pillars, which is first of all, NXTPORT, our data sharing platform. And the data sharing platform has to enable better transparency in the supply chain, which will drive operational efficiency gains, which will drive innovation. That's the order in which we see it. First transparency, then improved operational efficiency, then innovation. But NXTPORT, I will come back to that in a few slides. Chainport is the collaboration between 15 deep sea ports from around the world, including also Montreal. Together we represent 50% of the global container trade. And we share ideas, we share information, we work together on mutual topics, digitization, cybersecurity, and so on. And then finally, we have the Beacon, which is an ecosystem of startups, scale-ups, academia, established companies, all the way into multinationals, focusing on Internet of Things applications that are very applicable in a port area or in a smart city environment. And that was founded by us together with the University of Antwerp, the City of Antwerp, IMEC, the well-known nanotechnology company, the Technology Federation for IT, and then a consortium that is doing huge infrastructure works around Antwerp, and they want to embed a lot of IoT technologies in their infrastructure project. So diving a little bit deeper into NXTPORT, as I just said, the data sharing platform, but then again, when I say that, it's the means to an end, and the end is transparency, operational efficiency, and innovation. And let's say the deeper meaning of NXTPORT is that we want to fight the status quo. You have to understand that I graduated in the mid-90s as a transport economist. And at the time, it was all about closing the supply chain and multimodality. I never worked in the sector until 25 years later. I did arrive where I was destined to be, and guess what? I still heard the same thing. And when I look at it from my technology background that I acquired over my 25-year career, I see a global supply chain that has exploded, but that still runs on technology from the 90s. And by saying that, I'm being very respectful, because then I'm referring to EDI and to email, but it's also fax and telephony, and they are much older than the 90s. So there's a huge opportunity for a technology overall in the global supply chain. And we want to start from our local ecosystem and then connect to the global supply chain. Because what we see today, even more than ever, a lot of these things were known already long before the pandemic, but the pandemic made them even more clear than before, is that the supply chain challenges are all about operational efficiency. And at the end of the day, it's about making sure if you can increase that the capacity you have is better used, or that you can cut costs. Now, of course, in the economic fallout of the pandemic, guess what is going to be emphasized even more than before? Predictability. For sure, again, the pandemic made clear how unpredictable the supply chain is and how vulnerable it is to external shocks. Safety and compliance for a lot of cargo owners, that's a big thing, to know where their cargo is and to make sure that it is being transported in a safe way and a compliant way. Certainly if you're dealing with medication, food and all that kind of stuff, to make sure that that chain isn't interrupted and that unexpected events take place. And more, not necessarily today, but looking decades ahead of where we have to go to, sustainability will become a very important element. For sure, if it is embedded in the pricing mechanisms of transportation, the CO2 tax, and all these kind of things, so that the externalities of your supply chain decisions are also become visible in the final invoice you need to pay. So in that context, the mission statement of NXTPORT is we want to help make global supply chains become transparent, because again, that transparency is a key element in what is to be followed. Sustainability improvement, reliability improvement, compliance improvement, operational efficiency improvements, cost-cutting improvements. We don't see another way that is feasible if that is not in place. So we do that, for example, by providing a lot of event data, bringing them to the platform from all the stakeholders, whether you're a terminal, a shipping line, a forwarder, a customs agent, whatever, and make them available on the platform so that every other stakeholder in a process of, for example, an import container or a break bulk process or an incoming tanker that has to be organized by these stakeholders, all these events are available at the same time with the same quality to everyone so that they can act upon it and embed that in their processes. And you see, for example, here an import flow of a container where you have all these data points, like the green light, which is, for example, a container that has to be picked up at the container terminal, needs to have a green light from the terminal, means that it's ready to be picked up, from the shipping line, which means the invoice is paid, and from customs. Now today, these are three different messages, and when they do not arrive at the same time, or there is a miscommunication or misunderstanding, trucks show up and they say, you have to go back because the container is not ready yet. If you bring them on the platform and to combine them into three green lights, then you know for sure that the container is ready to be picked up. The same goes for a little piece of data, the next mode of transport. For every container you want to know, is the container going to move on via barge, a truck, or a train? If you know that piece of information, you can start optimizing how containers are flowing over your terminal instead of having to pick them up and replace them 3 times. Just a couple of examples how little nuggets of data can already have a big effect. For sure, if you make them available to all the other stakeholders who can embed that in their processes, in their applications, to be notified at the moment it happens and speed up the process that they have to fulfill. But it goes beyond that. The more value is created, and that's also something we've learned. If an entire cargo community in your port comes together and says, listen, we have a common goal, we have a common challenge, and we can only solve it if we join forces, which would actually happen with the break bulk industry related to steel in the port. We have always been a very strong port for steel, dealing with steel. And we have a couple of huge cargo owners like Arcelor, the big steel company. And they came and they said, listen, we are so behind on the digital front. A lot of what we do is still paper-based. Can you help us? So we created a community application that brings all these stakeholders on one specific application on top of the platform NXTPORT, so that all the data flow, all the data can be brought together and can be used to streamline a digitized process, which is, of course, the next level. And they agreed on how that process should flow, which allows every one of the stakeholders to become much more efficient. That has now recently been launched. We're onboarding additional parties, and we see that that community triggers additional initiatives, speeds up the process for digitizing an entire cargo group. Next thing is that because you're a world port, you can't stay focused on the local community. You'll have to start connecting other ports and other stakeholders from around the world, which is what we're currently doing thanks to our association with International Port Community System Association, IPSA, who had the vision for a network of networks. It's not about creating a super platform on a global scale, but more a federated model where you say, let's connect data platforms that are already there. And port community systems traditionally have already been that data platform in some way. It was more or less applications, but underneath or in them, they contain a lot of valuable data. Historically, they've always been focused on their own local ecosystem, but they start to understand that they have to open up and start sharing information from their port community systems to other stakeholders. So together with IPSA and using NXTPORT as a data backbone, we are now connecting in the first phase up to 70 ports from around the world that are going to start sharing information. And we don't, in all honestly, we don't know where that's going to bring us, but we take a first step. We have put a stick in the ground and said, this is step number one. And from there on, new ideas will pop up that we are able to enable as we move along. The most important thing is that the decision to join forces has been taken. And that's most cases, and that's also my experience from the last 3 years dealing with NXTPORT, is the biggest step. Because there's one big elephant in the room when you start talking about data sharing, which objectively speaking makes sense. But there is the elephant called trust. You need to build up trust between stakeholders in order to get to the point where you actively start sharing data instead of having discussions about it. At the same time, in terms of digitization, the port community systems themselves and what we build as a port authority for the sake of the entire port community is speeding up as well. We have a very long tradition of port community systems going back decades. But what we see now is that for the last 3 years, a lot of innovation is taking place and new applications are being built. I'm going to focus on a couple of them. First of all, we have the nautical backbone of the port called APIX, which I think every port has. It's where you make declarations on in and outgoing ships, dangerous cargo, all these kind of things. But it has become a platform that is evolving into a port planning environment where not only the in and outgoing ships are being registered and we take them into account for log planning. Port of Antwerp has 7 logs we have to deal with. But also it's becoming terminal planning, it's becoming a K planner, it's becoming an optimization tool for all the stakeholders. And as you see over there, we're talking about 35,000 ships and 269,000 barges on an annual basis. The system or the platform or APIX itself has 53 million transactions flowing through it on a yearly basis. And it's increasing because once we start injecting also radar data and AIS data, you start to talk about 800 data points on a second or per second. Of course, we start to make that data available to all the stakeholders, amongst others by a mobile app that gives, for example, a shipping line agent on a quarterly basis information on where is the ship, because when it arrives in Flushing, it has on average a 4-hour sailing time up to the Port of Antwerp itself, going down 80 kilometers inland via the river. So that's data that we are now exposing either via an app or an API so that you can also take that into your own internal systems. So all these port community systems are opening up by means of APIs. At the moment, we are very involved and very much driving the digitization of the barge industry, which is also a very conservative industry where you have an enormous long tail between a couple of really professional barge companies and then a lot of barges owned by a family, father, mother, and a son, and that's it. So you have an enormous long tail, and you have to make sure that if you were moving into digitization, you're not losing 80% of the barge owners. So we are providing them with digital tools to do fleet management, trip planning. Also, we work together with the other ports and the authority for hinterland waters, so the canals. For also in Flanders, you already have 1,400 kilometers of hinterland waterways, to digitize the voyage between A and B, so that when the barge owner says, I'm going to go from A to B, that all the intermediate data exchanges are automatically done, so that he doesn't have to notify himself for the hinterland waterways for port A, port B, port C. Online booking of a log. Now we combine that with AIS data to say, listen, you're trying to book a log an hour from now, but you see that you're still 3 hours away, so we're not going to approve that. We provide them with info on what is happening in the port, works taking place, K-walls that are available for docking, because there is a lack of K-wall where they can park themselves for a couple of hours. And also, together with the Port of Ghent and the Port of Amsterdam, we have taken the same architectural decisions to equip push barges with a tracker, so that we know where the push barges are, believe it or not. But in Amsterdam, where there are a lot of push barges, sometimes the owner calls the Port Authority to ask, where is it? Because I don't know any longer where it is. And of course, once we have that, we can also take that into account for port planning purposes. So again, you see that we are driving innovation for the port community to make sure that at the end of the day, operational efficiency improves, but also safety and security, but also competitive positioning of the port. This is another example where we are driving solutions for congestion at the big container terminals, where there was an issue with the barges coming in and having to wait very long before they were being helped. And one of the reasons was, yeah, of course, when you have a 23,000 TEU ship coming in, you're not going to give priority to a barge that has 5 containers to load and 20 to offload. So they had to wait, and they had to wait for a long time. So part of the solution was minimum call sizes, but in return, they were given a guaranteed booking slot. And this is an existing application, Barge traffic system, where the barge owners can book a slot on the container terminal. And this is the dashboard indicating what slots are available, how crowded it is going to become, etc., etc. And once more, once you book a slot, we actively monitor where the ship is. And if we understand, based upon our calculated time of arrival, that you will not make it, we notify the terminal that they can release a slot for somebody else. Also, we are now building tools so that there can be a cross-terminal planning. So competitors working together to optimize the capacity for the entire dock where they're all located, because many of these barges go from one terminal to another. So that was briefly what we're doing in terms of community builder and digitization to facilitate the community to become more digital, and they're doing so more efficient and also more competitive. When we look at the traditional roles of a port authority, landlord, operator, regulator, there the vision is that we want to create a digital nervous system on top of the physical port. And why is that relevant? Well, because we have a little bit of a challenge. The size of the port is 120 square kilometers big. I've been told that in terms of size, it's one of the bigger ports on the planet. If you're familiar with the city of Antwerp, you can bring the city of Antwerp and put it 6 times into the port. That's how big it is. And we have to understand every minute of every day what is taking place. So the metaphor is we create a digital nervous system that feels, senses, smells, everything that's taking place, so that we have real-time information on what is taking. And of course, that's the domain for a lot of innovation, amongst others, smart cameras. We have a very extensive camera network in the port, but we make these cameras smart, meaning that out of camera feeds, software is able to detect or to extract data, like recognizing trucks, cars, human beings. Or like you see top left, identifying objects on a K-wall, a fender, a bullet, a ladder. Why do we want to do that? Not because we don't know where it is, but we want to turn that around so that you have an inspection vessel going alongst the K-wall and it detects stuff. We know where it's supposed to be. So if the camera says, I see a fender, okay, I don't see a fender, but I am expecting a fender because our asset management system knows there should be one, then we conclude that the fender is gone and we need an intervention. Also, part of that exercise was to understand how much images you need to train a model to be over 95% confident. So now we're building this architecture, and it's unbelievable how many use cases you get once you can demonstrate the feasibility of this kind of technologies. Like, for example, detecting how many wagons a train is pulling and what kind of wagons they are, tank wagons, flat wagons, and so on, because we know how many trains they're driving around the port, but not how many wagons these trains have and what is the composition, okay? And also examples on detecting with smart cameras the exact position of a ship on the K-wall. Once you have that capability, you can hook it up to a drone, because what is a drone? A drone is a flying platform on which you can hook a lot of things, like, for example, a smart camera. To do what? For example, to detect oil spills on the water, because we're the 5th largest bunkering port on the planet, which means oil spills from time to time. And the longer it takes before you spot it, the more expensive it becomes to clean it up. So we did a project with the University of Antwerp to understand, using thermal and FLIFT and hyperspectral cameras, what we could detect. And the first small project proved that we can detect day and night 85% of the oil spills floating on the water. So we are now doing what needs to be done to get this operational and to bring it forward as one of the leading use cases for deploying drones that can fly over the port. Because a year and a half ago, I have a dream, which was I want to have 6-7 times a day drones flying beyond line of sight autonomously over the port, and as they are flying around, detect things like oil spills, heat exchange, inspect pipeline networks, being called in by police and fire brigade for situational awareness when there's a calamity taking place, ship medical supplies to somewhere deep in the port, and so on. And my team looked at me and they said, "You're nuts. That's not feasible." They came back after a month and said, "You know what? Technologically speaking, it's feasible, but there's one thing. It's totally and utterly forbidden by law, because beyond line of sight with remote controlled or autonomous drones are completely forbidden." So we said, okay, then we have to work on that. So what we did is we opened up the port as an innovation platform, and we invited a European project called Sapphire, which was about proving technology-wise that multiple drones beyond line of sight were feasible in a port, so that Europe was going to change the laws to make that kind of technology maturity possible, which I find a brilliant idea. Instead of waiting until the world is perfect, and by that time you lost the opportunity, you go into different maturity stages, you define the goals of that maturity stage, and if they are proven by means of a project, then you change the laws to make that maturity step feasible. And this is what we did. And what you're looking at are the flight trajectories of all the drone flights that took place. And to give you an idea of the complexity, the white line going into the red box right below is the in-flight route of the airport of Antwerp. And you saw that some of these flights went through it. For example, the Amazon Prime Air flights. This was such a unique opportunity to fly in an operational port with multiple use cases that Amazon Prime crossed the Atlantic with 20 people to be part of these demonstrations that took place over a couple of days' time. And by doing so, we proved to Europe that this step technology-wise is feasible, and they're now they have adapted the legislation, and it's now being translated into federal legislation. Another example of our innovation strategy, where one of the cornerstones is open up the port as an innovation platform so that promising technology can prove that it is ready to be deployed, so that we can go to the legislator together with these startup scale-ups and innovative companies to say, listen, it works, we've allowed them to prove it, and we need it for strategic purposes. So another example is autonomous vessels and remote controlled vessels. Remote controlled vessels for us is very important because of the large volume of barges. We have in our model split, 38% is barge, which is huge. And since there is a lack of licensed captains, since the cost of the labor cost in a barge is 30 to 40%, there is a strategic driver, a rationality to go into remote controlled barges. So we facilitated a startup to prove again that the technology works. We went to the legislator, and to our own surprise, they approved it. So what you're seeing here is the first operational remote controlled barge that is not yet sailing in the Port of Antwerp, but on a canal, 16 hours a day. And as you see, there's nobody on board, and there's nobody there because there's not a steering hut anymore. And it's for a construction company transporting sand from A to B. And in the lower right corner, you see how remotely that ship is being monitored, and if needed, a licensed captain can take over. And the business model is that one licensed captain should be able to follow up 3-4 ships at the same time, because As was proven by students from the Nautical College, 80% of the time a barge ship sails in a straight line. It's only when it has to go through a lock or through something narrow on a canal that there is an intervention needed, or that somebody has to stand by in order to make sure that that can be done in a safe way. So we're now working on operational procedures to allow these ships to enter the port and take a lock passage, which is again a challenge, but it's about stepping up a notch, going to higher complexity, starting from something which is easy, prove that it works, create confidence at the government level, and then go to the next level. So this is another example of their current operational control center. So this company, CFAR, is now running commercial projects. They have ship owners who have built or are building ships to sail around fully remote. And what the interesting thing is, they had the additional business model was all about remote control. Initially, it was even autonomous, but then they understood that it's maybe a step too far to begin with. But they have discovered new business models like extended crew. So they can extend the crew operational time by being involved. Or another business model is reduced crew. They can replace one employee on board of the ship during a certain time or during a certain situation. So as they move along, they discover new business models, which is a fairly interesting observation, if you ask me. And then finally, as part of the digital nervous system, we have the sensors. Of course, starting from meteo parks, we have an existing network of air quality sensors, but not just for air quality as such, but for detecting volatile organic components, given the enormous chemical cluster, so that we have a heads up there is an emission of something. We have equipped all our safety buoys with LoRa-enabled sensors, so that if somebody opens up the locker, we trigger an alarm, because you can assume that then somebody has taken the buoy to throw it in the water. And of course, if that alarm is being combined with a drone, you can send a drone to that location to spot where is the person in the water. We're currently after an open innovation call, we are now going to work on what we call smart bollards. So equipping a bollard with sensors that they continuously detect the strain and the strengths that are being applied on it. For sure, if you have a ship with 6-7 Beauforts of wind, then of course you have a lot of tension on that bollard. And we want to detect that for sure to avoid that all of a sudden, which already happened, a bollard is being pulled loose like a cannonball, and because if you're then close by, you're for sure dead. And the potential is huge because we have over 7,000 bollards in the port. So gradually we are equipping the port with all kinds of sensors linked to specific safety and security use cases, thereby making our nervous system much more accurate and so on. And once that all of that is in place, or as it grows, you can bring all that information into what we call the digital twin, the copy of the port, the digital copy of the port. And that triggers use cases like I just said. An alarm of a VOC air quality sensor goes off. You combine that with wind speed and wind direction. You send a drone to understand where is the emission going to come from. The same with a safety buoy, a drone, you turn a camera. We've proven technology-wise it works. So we're now creating all these use cases together with operations and safety and security colleagues. We came up with a roadmap of 110 use cases for the next couple of years. So gradually we make that port completely 24/7 visible, which allows a lot of people focusing on safety and security to be much more efficient and focus on those exceptions instead of just walking and running around hoping to detect something. And for us, it has become part of a vision, and we have created a brand around it called APICA, Antwerp Port Information and Communication Assistant, which hints, of course, at APIX, and the current big nautical system, where the system becomes assistant, thereby indicating that what we try to do, what we try to discover is how can technology help our human operators, our colleagues to become much more effective and efficient. It's not about replacing them. It's about making them better, more impactful. At the moment, they should be aware of something taking place. And we provide a lot of inspirational movies around that to clearly point out to the organization that it is feasible to let go of the past and see the picture of the future. We do a lot of proof of values because we can talk endlessly about new technologies, but we can just take the technology, do something with it, and then show it to the organization. And what I've learned is that more often than not, you see a light bulb go off and they say, oh, wait a minute, that's interesting. Maybe I got a few other ideas, and that's how the ball starts to roll. So I'm within my 25 minutes. I hope it was insightful. I can talk about this for hours. It was a quick overview. And now I'd like to leave the floor for questions and answers if there are any in the chat room. Magali, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Erwin. Your presentation is amazing. And when you talk about ports and digitalization, we feel your passion and your vision. And thank you for your generosity and all the stock that you share with us today. And just to let you know that I think people are really, really interested in what you said. And we have some questions. So I will start with the first one that I received. So it's from Marianne Robson from Vancouver. She said, all of these projects are most impressive. Could you comment on how these are financed? The funding of your project.
Yeah, most of them are within my digital and innovation budget that is linked to strategic goals as part of the 3-year plan. Okay. So that's how most of these things are done. And we have several governance bodies that decide on the roadmap, priorities, and so on. Now, of course, the digital and innovation budget, starting from 3 years ago, there was no digital innovation team. There was a sort of an IT team. Has grown significantly, both in number of people as well as in budget, but it's still within acceptable norms. If you see that even with the substantial budget, the demand is still higher than the supply, okay? But it's a question of also absorbing all these kind of things in your organization, the day-to-day operations. Because a lot of people have good ideas about what we could do, but at the end of the day, they have to pick it up and make it part of their day-to-day operations. And that is always a little bit slower than just developing stuff. So we are mindful of the fact that absorbing that and making sure it has a good impact on your day-to-day operation also requires some time. So we are becoming more and more realistic. At the same time, we have an innovation pipeline to make sure that we look with safe bets and risky and gutsy bets way into the future. We have, for example, also 12 innovation projects going on with the University of Antwerp, okay, with everything in between technology readiness levels, TRL levels 1 up to 8. Yeah, so that we have a good span of things. We are long shots, but always linked to a valid use case or strategic driver. And then things we say, listen, if we give it a little bit of push, then it is market ready, maybe a year faster than anticipated. And that's also relevant, you see. But translating all that innovation into reality is, of course, the most tricky part in innovation. It's cool to do a lot of POCs, but at the end of the day, where does it land? And technology is not a hurdle, it's the organization that's absorbed. And a lot of cases, as I pointed out in my deck, in my presentation, is legislation, because we have to be honest, not one law on the planet was ever written to facilitate innovation. It's actually more about regulating it or avoiding or being risk averse about anything. Yeah, of course, that doesn't help. That doesn't help.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. Another question, can supply chain port system developers in Canada register to access APIC's mobile app and see the functionality?
I think you can, yeah. I think you can.
Okay.
We will have to allow you access on APICs, but the data that is in the app is open data.
Open data.
And the same goes for NXTPORT. If you're interested, you go to the marketplace, you can register yourself, and there is always a test version of the APIs to play around with. and it's also documented and so on. So a developer with knowledge on API should be able to start playing around with it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I have a lot of questions. Let me check. Okay. What were key challenges in data sharing, and was there resistance?
Well, I already talked about it. It's a good question anyhow. Is the elephant in the room, trust.
Trust.
And when NXTPORT was founded, they acknowledged that elephant in the room. So that's why the data governance in NXTPORT is one of the key features. It's a unique selling proposition. And what that is all about is that it guarantees that you, as the owner of the data, will always be in control. You will always be able to define who has access to what kind of data. The granularity, the moments, or the, let's say, the decision points in a process, all these kind of capabilities are on the platform. Let me give you one example. One of the earlier adopters of NXTPORT was or several federations, European federations of the chemical industry, because they wanted to create an electronic version of a tank cleaning document, which for them is a very important document from a safety perspective, but also from a fraud perspective, because if you have to clean a tank, it costs money. So there were parties who tried to say, listen, it's clean, while they hadn't done anything. So if you then combine two chemical products, you might end up with an issue. But it also contains a lot of commercial information, because the document describes who shipped what kind of cargo to whom. So for them, it was really imperative that that data was not exposed, and that after 3 iterations, the 4th iteration was erased. Or you have, with regard to IPSA, the port community data sharing, we don't store data. Sometimes we do, if that is the request, sometimes we don't. So you see that data governance and all the functionalities around it provides the trust levels between parties to say, listen, let's start sharing in data, but I will always be able to define to what level or even revoke. So that's why if you connect to an API on NXTPORT, it will work technically, but you won't see any data, because that still requires an action from the owner of the data to say, I'm opening up the vault for you to a certain extent. And that's, I think, one of the drivers. And of course, yeah, things like burning platforms, or a community that understands we can only move forward if we start working together. And that, of course, is not always at the same level from a port community perspective, because you have so many different cargo groups. You have different stakeholders at different stages of maturity. The container business is difficult in that respect, because you have huge international global players and then a lot of local players. That makes it difficult. A more tight-knit community at the same maturity level, that's easier, like the break bulk was.
Absolutely. Sorry, I had an issue with my laptop. I just look at the questions. Yes, I think I'm going to take 2 more questions. So how did you involve the government transportation governing body in your country in all your projects? And were they able to help in delivering on your digital initiative?
Yeah, well, from the top of my mind, I can't find the likewise body that you're describing from our perspective. You have to understand that we are a country with 2 regions, and most of the many, not all of them, which is also an issue. Many of the responsibilities are at the regional level, so Flanders. And for other things, it's federal. But let's say the most important stakeholders for us, or the most important stakeholder, is customs, which are on their own now on multi-year project or vision. Vision is the better word, to start digitizing. And of course, we try to enable them, amongst others, with providing NXTPORT as a data backbone, so that they can create one single entry point to the Belgian customers, which is still a federal authority, to bring data to the customers and for them to send it back. That's one of our key stakeholders from other government levels. Food and Drug Administration was also one of them. But from a transportation perspective, there is no overall government body driving that. It's fairly scattered, to be honest, because we're also dealing with the railroad operator. By the way, we're really, really jealous about what you have achieved in Montreal in coordinating how trains flow through the port. We want to go to the same kind of, let's say, capability to be able to optimize how train capacity is being planned and utilized and steered and governed. That's why we're building rail traffic system, which is a digital platform to bring all these stakeholders together. Again, for the same reason, transparency, who wants to do what when, so that you can start playing around with that, you see? Because we have to double the amount of cargo via train by the end of 2030. That's the vision. But we depend upon a lot of stakeholders on which we do not necessarily have a control. So that requires a lot of patience, alignment.
Yes.
As you will probably understand.
Yes. Okay, well, you know, just to let you know that people are really, really, you know, amazed by your presentation, and we have really good comments. So thank you very much. I'm going to take one last question. With such a diverse port and likely competing interests, what's the process to move ahead with one project or another?
Can you rephrase that, because I'm not clear I fully understood what the question is all about.
Well, I think it's with all the projects that you have into the port and different, you know, interests. Which project are you? How do you select a project? You have different projects, and why you pick one of the project of the another? I think I try.
So it's about, yeah, okay, how do you set priorities and so on?
Yeah.
That's been an evolution over the last few years at a corporate level. I think it's fair to say that a couple of years ago, in terms of governance, we weren't that strong. The most important governance body was the executive committee, but of course you can't bring everything to the executive committee, then our head explodes. So we, as part of the strategic plan 2018-2020, and the 5 strategic objectives and the 15 strategic programs, we set up an EPMO, Enterprise Portfolio Management Office, which is now responsible, initially focusing only on the strategic projects, then gradually taking in operational projects, like renovating K-walls and so on, because yeah, strategic projects are by definition strategic, but most of the money was on operational projects like keeping the port up and running and infrastructure renewal and so on. So we brought them in as well. And now we're moving for the next operational plan into a single agenda, okay, where all the, let's say, the innovation board, the process optimization board, and the investment committee are there to prepare new initiatives, to make sure they become mature, bring them on the single agenda, and if they are approved, then they are part of it. And then, of course, you bring that, you align that with how much capex, how much investments you want to make against what is the return you need to promise to your shareholder, and so on and so on and so on. So that's pure economics, because keep in mind that some of us look at us as a government, but we are a for-profit company. We pay dividends. So we act as a private company, but at the same time we follow all the rules of a public organization. So that's fairly interesting. Half of our board is a sitting political coalition of the city, and half of them are independent captains of industry. To make the balance between societal goals and the other hand, EBITDA, profit, shares, so the economical and the financial stuff, and you need to balance that. Which makes it an interesting thing. It's a fairly interesting organization to work, fairly complex, of course, because of all the different dimensions, local, national, European, global. But yeah, interesting environment to work for. And like, growing by the day. We're not perfect. We're far from being perfect, but we are not ignorant, and we try to improve as we move along. We can't boil the ocean. We're not going to try to do that. But we're ambitious. Just look at the last slide. This is, by the way, for those who are not familiar, this is our port house, is our headquarters. And it blends the successful past, which is the building underneath, an existing building, with an ambitious future. So if travel is allowed again and you would envision coming to Antwerp, I encourage you to come here. In the atrium, there is a huge aerial picture of the port where you will be allowed to walk around and see what we do. And you can ask for a tour around the building and a tour around the port. So we're more than willing to welcome you. In the good old days, 7 months ago, we had 10,000 visitors on a yearly basis. So,
wow. Wow.
Voila. So yeah, we try to see opportunities where others see challenges. We have a lot of challenges, but if you think in terms of opportunities, creativity starts to flow. And that is what I think is my most important role, is to convince people that there are opportunities in life and not problems.
Wow.
Voila.
So again, Erwin, thank you very much. And well, I have a lot of, congratulations and questions. So we are going to do a copy paste about all the comments from our attendees and send it to you, because it's just, I saw a lot of wow about your presentation and all the information you share. So thank you very much. It's really appreciated, your time, your generosity, and we feel your passion. And certainly we are going to follow your adventure with the Port of Antwerp. And thank you very much.
And I'm looking forward to come to Canada once more. You know,
you have to come to Montreal.
Top of my list. So I'll
You
give you a
have
call. All right, listen everyone, yeah, good afternoon for you. For me, it's now dark outside, so I'm going to go home now. So nice talking to you all. Thanks for the compliments. I see it in the chat, so I really appreciated that it was worthwhile your time, and looking forward to see you somewhere in the future. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Thanks again to our sponsor, Link, to be our sponsor today. Really appreciated your trust and to support the Institute. For all the attendees, don't forget to complete the feedback survey. Please, it's just 1 or 2 minutes, but will help the CILTNA to provide other webinars and to have to invite some speakers like Erwin to share their experience and projects. About our next webinar that will be on November 9 and 10, because it's the outlook of the Institute. So you have all the program and the registration on our website on www.CILTNA.com. We have some membership that membership is open. So if you want to know more about the Institute and all the benefit that you can have, please go on our website and look at the membership section. And thank everyone for attending, for your support. And I hope to see you at your next webinar. Thank you, and have a good day, a good evening, or a good night, depending where you are. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.